How great would it be to get up close and personal with the beauty industry heroes we love and admire, and to ask them, how did you learn to do what you do? I'm Chris Baran, a hairstylist and educator for 40 plus years, and I'm inviting all our heroes to chat and share the secrets of their success. Well, welcome to another episode of Headcases, and I'm really excited about this one because we have a threepeat on here, meaning this guest is one of the only ones I believe that we've had on 3 times, and he's here to talk to us one more time about the State of the Union. Now, why do I think that you should be listening to this? Well, whether you're an independent stylist or a salon owner, whether you're involved in the school side of what we do in our industry or a stylist working in a salon, if you understand that data and education is gold and how to use that to move yourself forward in this changing, divisive time that we've got in our world and in the industry. I have to say this, that I'm not going to give you a lot of insights into this. We're going to talk a bit more about it. You'll learn more about this gentleman in just a second here when you're watching. But there's so many nuggets that in this particular episode that you're going to want to listen to this over and over and over again so that you take everything away. We're going to talk about the Wild Wild West that happened is years and years back and how it turned pro and what that means to where we are now, particular with the balance that's happening in our industry post-COVID. But all of that is the reason why I've invited this person back time and time and time again, because he's the qualified person who can talk to us about us and create some context to what this is all about. He labels himself as the dispassionate observer. And so I just want to get back into Headcases and this week's episode. And so let me introduce to you one more time the forever observant, the passionately dispassionate person who is a friend, teacher, mentor of mine, Mr. Gordon Miller. Gordon, it is, I don't know who I enjoy more, I have to say you're holding the record because you're the first person to have a threepeat with us. Ooh. So I just want to say welcome back to Headcases. And as always, I'm sitting on pins and needles waiting to hear what your report is for the industry. So welcome.
Me as well. Thank you. And I think the three-peat is like a sports metaphor. And as the old gay guy in the beauty industry, I have no idea what that is, but I'll take it as a compliment.
Well, listen, you're ranking up there with Michael Jordan right now. So
I do know who that is.
Yeah.
I'm a Chicagoan, so of course I know who Michael is.
Oh, Gordon, so it's great to have you on. And but I know that there's some people out there that know you. You've been on twice before. I'm going to ask everybody if this is your first time listening to Gordon, you're going to want to go back and listen to the other ones. They were I think you were number 27 and number 77, I think it was. And now we should have had one earlier, and then you could be 137, which is our episodes. So it's great to have you on here. But for those people who might not know who the heck that Gordon Miller is, why don't you just give us a brief summary of why hair?
The really brief one, because it's been many decades of time in this industry. My whole adult life has been in the professional beauty industry. I'm not a hairdresser, never been a salon owner, but always on the business side, and feel so lucky to be here and to know people like you, Chris Baran. I mean, and 137 episodes? Kudos.
Yeah. Well, it's 100. You'll be 138 is what your number is.
I love it. As a fellow podcaster, I love it. Spent most of my career in the education space, like over 20 years. I kind of came into the industry by accident in beauty schools, but Pivot Point for 10 years. Leo Passage is still to this day my most important mentor. We lost him many years ago, but Pivot Point left as VP after 10 years, and then I became president of Milady Publishing. So I was, deep in the weeds in the school world. And then I had the great joy for 10 years of being executive director of the National Cosmetology Association, which is now part of PBA. So I did association work, community. I just love it so much to this day. And then because I was so obsessed with the community, when it was time for me to do the next part of my career, Facebook had just happened. And I was like, oh my God, this is the modern community. This is where everything is going. I was the first person in the industry to teach a Facebook class, which,
Wow.
I jumped in the deep end really quickly and then got into consulting. That led me to media, and I was publisher of American Salon Magazine. And then for 5 years, I was CEO and president of Hairbrained. I was one of the partners of the founders, and slid out of that. And now I am the general manager of Intercoiffure, which is probably my last chapter in the industry. Time to slow down a little bit. And but Intercoiffure being it excites the heck out of me because it is an association nonprofit for employment-based salons of a certain size, some of the best salons in the entire industry. And I believe that employment-based salons I love every opportunity anybody has to do what they want to do with their careers. But I know factually that employment-based salons are the foundation of everything. So many people who are my friends who are very successful in suites, well, they came up through employment-based salons. They got trained, they got educated, they got smart as both hairdressers and business people. So again, final chapter, and I'm having a blast with Intercoiffure America, Canada.
Well, I know that we're going to be friends no matter whether it's a final chapter and where that ends.
Absolutely.
But I do have to say this. I hope that it's not for a while because our industry needs you right now. But I want to set this up because I do want. You're my go-to guy to find out what the hell's going on in our industry and what is the state of our industry as it said. But I want to set this up for whether you're a salon owner, whether you're an independent, whether you're a stylist. Knowing what's going on is really, really, really important. And know where our industry is going so you can make your adjustments, whether in whatever side of the business that you're in. Now, but I want to set this up with two individual instances that I've run across in the last while. The first one was from a salon owner, good friend, out of the Midwest, and I was doing a gig with them, and they have multiple salons, huge staff, and he gave me this observation. He said, Chris, because he calls me that because we're good friends. He says, Chris, he says, my observation was in the 70s, the hair industry was like the wild, wild west. Everybody did everything. It was one company would do one thing. All the hairdressers were doing whatever they netted on their own. But it was like, poo, poo, poo. Shoot. That was my guns, by the way. Poo, poo, poo. You can tell how much of a hunter I am. But he said was the wild, wild west. Then the manufacturer came in. Taught us, educated us, made us like professionals, and we became professionals. And then he said, whether it was COVID or what it was, but he said that he has so many people coming in and say, I'm just here for the education, and then I'm going to go on my own. So as the salon professional, obviously a little disheartening, and I quite frankly said to him, well, then why don't you just not hire them? And he said, well, if I didn't hire them, I wouldn't have anybody. So, there is an upside to that, but that's one instance that he talked about. He says, now we're back to the wild, wild west. And then I was talking to somebody that was in the manufacturing business on the equipment side. And this person said, he jumped out of the business now going in on his own because he said that a lot of the big salons that would normally have major renovations and they would do they're making their brand more current, etc. And now they're going back to just fixing what might be broken, and just onesie twosie things just to make my salon get the salon up to par. But it was more from an aspect of I don't know where the industry is going, so I'm afraid to put these $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 renovations that are going into my business if it's not going to be lucrative and not giving me an ROI. So based on that, you and I had a conversation about some of the things that are going on. What does that mean, what we just talked about, and what should people be aware of?
Well, let me start by saying one of my favorite words that I think should matter to all of us is context. And that is to just kind of understand how anything that we're thinking about at some sort of deep level, or personal lives or professional lives, pretty much anything. Context is kind of connecting the dots between that idea and the larger world. What's happening. And I've long said, and as someone who's not a hairdresser, not a salon owner, I've been really fortunate to work for some really smart people and work with some really smart people. who've taught me so many things about the larger industry. When I went to work for Pivot Point a million years ago, I was so curious about all the people I was meeting and seeing, and the founder, Leo Passage, was so wonderful in teaching me the history and the connecting what brands are doing and what they used to do. And he introduced me a lot of older hairdressers. One of my favorite people ever, his name was Ruth Aiken. And when I was probably in my 40s, she was literally 99 years old. And she had sold her salon, but she still kept a chair in it. And once a week, she would do hairdressing. She would do hairdressing. She would do clients. And I said to her one day, I was like, Miss Ruth, as they called her, I was like, you're still at your age? And she said, until either I die or they die, this is what I love. I'm going to keep doing it. But she taught me about the history of hairdressing from her own perspective, going back to the 1920s.
Wow.
Which was just amazing. And so I love context. I love understanding something bigger than what we are in this moment. And when you understand history about anything, the world, our country, our industry, I just think it informs you as you think about everything that you just asked, Chris. And what's happening today, I think, is very much rooted in what's always rooted in the larger world. We are very much, and it has been proven to me over and over and over again, decade by decade, whatever we're experiencing, if you take a step back and say, what's happening in our larger world? There's a good chance you're going to see a dotted line. Maybe obviously, maybe you have to ponder a little bit harder or squint, but you'll start to see it. And today, I'm going to start with the larger world. We live in a larger world that is very confusing. It's very divisive. And no matter what side of life people are on or what their belief systems are relative to all kinds of stuff, one thing that we know about the world today and about human beings today is we don't necessarily know what to believe and who to believe. We just don't. There's so much information with social media. There's old school media. I mean, there's opinions, because today more than ever, because of social, we can express our opinions and we can express them loudly or not. And so it's a confusing world. And going to the industry, I find it to be the most confusing. Not that I feel confused, but I look at the marketplace and I go, wow, that like people are on all sides of things, rental versus chair rental versus suites versus commission versus big versus small. There's just a lot of divisiveness between it all. People kind of throwing rocks, at another group. Often, I believe, because they just don't maybe understand the other group. Social media, there's businesses that gain by putting clickbait out, which are these crazy headlines. You see it on Instagram posts. So we live in confused times. And I think we're a confused industry. Somebody I know is an old good friend of mine, Sam Bricado, New York salon, iconic hairdresser, just amazing guy. He said to me probably, 15 or more years ago, he was talking about the industry. He said, the one thing I just know, like in my gut, is that this is not a complicated industry. Being in the salon, buying the chair, owning a salon, owning your business, even if it's a business of one, not complicated. He said, but it's hard. It's hard. And when things are hard, sometimes we get confused about what are the fundamentals of business. And as the industry, I love that you talked about the 70s and your friend, because I came into the industry.
I wasn't born by then. No,
you're just a youngin'. A youngin'. I came in 1978. Actually, I think you beat me by a year or two. I could be wrong about that. But I came in 78. And to your point a few moments ago, I mean, the brands weren't quite here yet. They were just Redken was here. They were kind of the first of the big brands to make it in. Clairol was very present, but they started in mass and they found the salon, and there wasn't a whole lot more. There was a few things. Jerry Redding was starting to pop a little bit, and then we came into the 80s, and then you and I lived through this time where all the big brands that we know today happened. Paul Mitchell happened, Horst happened, Arnie Miller happened. These entrepreneurial, many of them, well, all of them. Well, Arnie wasn't a hairdresser. Was Arnie a hairdresser? Now that I said that, I don't even remember.
I can't remember.
I don't remember. But you had these entrepreneurs who loved the industry. I know that they were a salon owner before they were anything else, the Millers. And so they brought economic power to the industry by way of the industry because they were fascinated. They saw opportunity. I think Paula Kent Meehan, the founder of Redken, led the way because she and Jerry Redding came into the industry and Paula said to me, I drove around Beverly Hills with Paula one day. and she was like 80 and she's very tiny. And she drove, the steering wheel was like in front of her, scared shitless.
It was like an aiming device.
As she's driving us around, and she's telling me the history of not only Redken, but again, the industry in that era. And she said, I loved my hairdresser. And I started to learn about hairdressing because she was an actress at the time and a model. And she said, I wanted them to have better lives. And this retail thing, I got fascinated. She met Jerry Redding. And I think they all had a passion, for the hairdresser and for the salon. And they saw an opportunity to raise the bar for everybody, to make it a more professional industry. As you said, the 80s is where really the professional salon that we know today was kind of born. When I was a kid, it was the beauty parlor, it was Betty's Beauty Box.
With your operator.
And everybody had the little, almost like nurses' outfits, like a more fashionable nurse outfit and weird little shoes, almost like orthopedic. That was pre-1980, And then we come into the 80s and all of a sudden we grow up, we become this professional thing. And in the 90s, it really took off. And you had more and more economic power, more and more brands going, oh my gosh, there's opportunity. Let's come up with something new. Hairdressers who watched the Arnie's and the Horse start their little brands. Many of them became big brands. We had Jerry Crescenza and Sebastian, and just so much. And all of those things helped bring up the little salon, that became the big salon, and the multi-million-dollar salons, started popping. So you had all this happening, and distribution, which was the way that people got stuff. Those product companies got matched up with distributors. Well, distributors were already selling end papers and things, back in the day, and hairspray, which was the only thing that salons were selling, along with rain bonnets. And so the product companies together grew distribution. And then distribution started to get bought up, and the little family businesses started to become parts of bigger businesses. Then you had Salon Centric and BSG. So you had this evolution of the industry that kind of takes us where we were, I'll say, pre-COVID, which was big corporations, big economic power, some small ones too, bringing all kinds of resource, education. I mean, I grew up in the education side. I watched education that was mostly provided through hairdressing clubs, which were part of the National Cosmetology Association, on the ground, not product driven, no fancy shows, no fancy lights. That was the time, but they were learning from one another. Brands and distributors saw that and said, that's an opportunity. We can do that better. We can add some pizzazz to it. We can train trainers to be better because we have that economic power. And everybody rose up, because of that. I always say when people today, because of social media, which again, I think that's that confusing stuff that's in the moment that we're living through. There's a lot of chatter on social media, which I pay a lot of attention to. This anti-brand. Brands are bad. Brands are hurting you. Brands are trying to take advantage of you. And I'm like, there's always been tension between different types of businesses and small businesses, people. Before today, I would say to young people, it's not a new idea. But without brands and the innovation that they bring to the industry, balayage didn't happen by itself. Someone had to first develop the hair color, right?
Right.
All kind of dry shampoo. That happened in a laboratory. All these. So brands are so essential today. Apps. All the technology. These are big companies bringing all kinds of resources. So there's this chatter about the negativity about many parts of our industry, including salons against salons and employment categories against categories. Again, going to where are we today, in this confused time, pre-COVID, I think we had the institutions, and I'll say brands, distribution, those would be categories of what I think of kind of industry institutions. In the larger world, we have government, and we have lots of things that happen there. And then we have businesses and, technology companies, and they're so big that they're like institutional. In our industry, it is the brands, it is the distributors, it's the schools. The schools are its own, part of the industry, and it has its own power, and then we have the regulatory agencies and what they mean for the industry. And it feels like once we came out of COVID that we saw each of those entities, groups, morph, just like we saw hairdressers morph and individual human beings morph. We came out of COVID a little bit different, than looking and feeling different than before COVID. We were less trustful. We watched the media for other reasons, not COVID per se, but the larger economy start to get fractured and politicized. Yeah. And again, it all just becomes very confusing. I see all that in the industry. Brands, because of COVID and because of the digital innovations in the world that were happening simultaneously. We all jumped on Clubhouse. Nobody thought anybody would be on something like Clubhouse pre-COVID.
Yeah.
If somebody said it to you, you'd be like, that's never going to happen. In the beauty industry, no, no, no. Go back 25 years and you look at the beginning of the internet for the professional beauty industry, specifically behindthechair.com. Many conversations with my friend Mary Rector over the years, who was like, all the companies said, you're crazy, Mary. Hairdressers are never going to be on the internet. It's not going to happen. Well, 25 years later, Mary was right. Hairdressers would be there. They would be empowered by it. They would find resources. It's just like the rest of the world, right? We mirror the image of the larger world. And so coming out of COVID, we saw media companies get smaller. We had like 6 big media companies. Now we have 2.
Yeah.
We saw brands who were employing tens of thousands of educators on the ground. At one time, I think the number I saw was like about 30,000 educators across all the brands. I mean, a company like L'Oreal had like 10,000 educators across brands on the ground. 60-70% of those are gone today.
Yeah.
We came out of COVID. There was a belief that digital education would take over. Kind of naturally, because of COVID, a lot of people left the industry. A lot of people changed what they wanted to do with themselves in the industry. So again, all these changes. And it left, I believe, the country kind of less than. We were less connected as human beings. We were less trustful as human beings. Businesses got wonky. The economy had its own challenges because of COVID. And again, a lot of residue, kind of negativity in all of it. Also, all kinds of new opportunities. That's the other fascinating part about it. It's just all kinds of new opportunities. So in the industry, again, with the manufacturers pulling back, the distributors pulling back, from really being the primary source of great quality education to kind of less than, just because fewer bodies on the ground, more digital. And I would say, as someone who loves digital, that it didn't do for us what we hoped. Like, we haven't caught up, I think, with the innovation. Most of our professionals, they're in it, but that's not where they want to live, and it's not where they want to necessarily get their education. So I think a lot of opportunity to teach has kind of been left on the table, and people aren't getting the resources. And then because of social media, and I think we're all a victim of this. We've become confused about what is education. And a lot of people think that watching a 3-minute social media TikTok is education. And I would argue, as somebody deep in the weeds, and someone who, by the way, just loves wasting 2 hours on TikTok looking at crazy cat videos. It's like, I can do that all day.
Hi, my name is Chris, and I love cat videos.
Right. Exactly. But we've become confused, because we'll watch education, and there's lots of education on TikTok and on Instagram. And we're just kind of making an assumption, because I watched that I learned something. And I think it's important that we understand how we learn. And very few of us are, Albert Einstein level people who can learn something in 3 minutes. Even old school, whatever it took to get it into our heads, we then had to get it into our hands as professionals. And I'm not the hairdresser, but I've been around hairdressers. I always say I think I've been in more haircutting classes than most professionals, just because I lived in the education space for so long. And at Pivot Point, you studied how people learn. And I know the power of muscle memory, and how repetition, how important it is, and how profoundly great it can be, or how kind of screwed up it can be. Because if you get the wrong technique in your hands, and you leave that TikTok video or even a beauty show class, and you just don't quite have your technique down, I'm always fascinated being a haircutting class when a great educator starts showing how the movement, how you stand, affects what happens when you cut. Yeah. Just the fact that you're standing crooked has an implication for the cut. Most people, I think, until they're taught that, they don't know that. So again, you watch something, maybe you go to a trade show, you watch somebody in a booth on a crowded floor, and you're observing, and you pick something up, and you go home and you start doing it. Well, until you're around a great educator or a great coach who can say, not this way, that way,
Yep.
And I would say, then you really didn't learn. So I think we're confused about how we learn, and we're confused about the amount of time and amount of effort it takes to learn. And what most important, I think we lost coming out of COVID, not that everybody knew it, but I think more knew it, is what we have to invest in ourselves to be good at anything.
Yeah.
There's a lot of and this is probably one of the most important ideas, and I'll stop after this and let you jump in here. But talking about where we are. Pre-COVID, there wasn't a lot of conversation about that the hustle was bad for you. Coming out of COVID, it was a serious industry-wide conversation that the hustle was a bad thing. Yeah. That we were encouraged, generationally, to work hard, and maybe not focus enough on balance in our lives and our professional time. And I think what got lost in that conversation, to me, as someone who kind of spends my life dealing with and engaging with and observing the larger industry, but I get to hang with a lot of really professional people like Chris Baran, and I get to be like, okay, I see what you all have in common across generations. I have not met a person who's successful in this industry, truly successful, and whatever that looks like for them, because I'm seeing it in them because we all measure success differently. I haven't met anybody in all of these years who I didn't walk away going, they hustle. Now, today, I think it's important to recognize that, because of balance, and balance is so important, we all have different versions of what makes us balanced. I love being a workaholic. I mean, I truly do. It makes me happy. When I'm not working hard, I'm not as happy. Some people would judge me for that. That's okay. I feel good about myself and the life that I've lived. But I know people who are 20 hours a week and who are very successful in their minds and in how they value life. And when I spend time with them, what I recognize about them and their attitude towards that 20 hours, they hustle. They hustle for 20 hours. And then they spend time with their family and their children and whatever else they would do, to go do volunteer work, whatever makes them happy. And so I think we've lost this idea that the hustle's not only a bad thing, but if you want to get to a certain place in life, high level within whatever category of the industry you live in, you got to hustle. But your hustle and my hustle don't have to be the same. They do not have to be the same. And I think that's important. And then the last thing I would say about that, and connected to kind of everything I said, we've never seen turnover in the industry like we've seen today. It's always been a challenge for us. And I think the turnover is so often because of our expectations are not aligned with the reality that we're facing every day. But too often, we don't know what that reality is supposed to be because information is so disconnected and we don't know what to grab onto. And I think generationally, a lot of us are afraid to say the truth to younger people, and I feel blessed in a sense that in our generation, our folks, for better or for worse, just said it the way it was. And sometimes it took us a while to catch up to them and they weren't always right. But now I think we're a little bit more sensitive as humans and there's good in that. But I keep saying, that we owe it to young people coming up behind us to at least share what we really believe and not be afraid to say it. Let them process it. A mutual friend, Michael Cole, said to me, we were talking about this one day. He said, Gordon, when I was 20, he said, we're the same generation. It was peace, love, and happiness. That was the goal, end the war, it was kind of the hippie era. And, we wanted to live in peace, and he said, when I was 30, he's like, I was about the money. Yeah. He says, because that's what it took to have a happy life. And that's what I figured out. And he said, so we change, we learn, we change. And I think it's important to recognize that young people are always going to change and always going to learn. And I feel like we owe it to share our experience and knowledge as it comes through us, and they can do what they want with it. But I feel like too much of the industry has gone quiet on what we've learned. Again, they'll judge it and do what they want with it. But I think we owe it to them to say it a little louder than we're saying today. And because we're not, we're more fractured than ever. Yeah. Great words. I mean, there was a lot in there, and I talk a lot. no, and that's why we have you on here, is it makes my job easier. But the reality, there was so many great nuggets in there, and I think that it's, I think education is the part that put us in there. Yeah. There is a lot of great education that is on internet now. Oh, and I have to admit, the internet. I meant social media. I mean, and I meant just on even right? In social media, there's good nuggets. Yes, nuggets. And if maybe we can tie some of this together for people, that I have to tell you this. Even myself now, I'm fine. I've been watching so much social media going on. I'm trying to take bigger nuggets of information that took me months and months and months, years to learn. Yeah.
I'm trying to condense it down because I know that the listener wants like these. They used to say on TV, if you watch, my dad always said this to me. He said, if you watch TV, each scene is roughly about 7 seconds, and then there's a change in the scene to keep your mind active.
Yep.
And even if you're watching videos that are going on where people are giving information, they have to have this collateral information that's out there for visual stimulus.
Yes.
And I want to talk about how that about education just for a second, because you use that word, and that's really was the hook that took us from the 70s, the 80s, and to where we were in the 2000s.
Yep. And it did evolve each decade. It was never the same.
Exactly. And the point being is that if you really think about it, from manufacturer to the salon, from the salon to the stylist, from the stylist to the consumer, it was that connection that happened, and it happened because of education.
Yes.
And you know, I don't know if this ever happened to you. Are you that kind of person like me where you read this interesting quote and it's impactful for you, and then all of a sudden you see it in everything that you're doing.
Oh yeah.
And I was talking to my son who's producing this right now, and was talking about how something I was proud of him for not giving up. And this morning I was going through some of my archives, and I found this quote from Usain Bolt, that obviously one of the fastest runners in the world. And he said, and I want everybody to listen real close to this. He said, I practice for 4 years for a 9-second event.
Wow.
And he said, and I see people giving up because they don't do it right the first time. And I think, and you know how I stored that? I took a picture of it in my computer and I had it go there, and I was going through some stuff, and I went, oh my God, the universe just threw this at me. And it's so profound based on what we're talking about right now. So, you know, I think there's that hook, and I'm hoping in our industry we can take this 7-second turnaround where I've got to be stimulated, combine that with the education that we have that was so integral, and the fact that we had to do things over and over and over and over again, to use that muscle memory analogy that you gave, that has to happen. And that's why I think even myself, I found if I'm getting so involved with just this stimulus that I have to have every 7 seconds, 10 seconds or whatever, I'm not willing to practice it like I did before, and I can get depressed over it.
Yeah.
So, and I think there's that.
That's a really key point.
Yeah, that there's this depression that's going on in our industry. I've been feeling it, that because things are either happening quicker or different, or everything's shifting, and I find myself, I'm trying to climb this ladder of this success that goes up, and you keep moving where the top of the ladder is. And I think that that's really affected us, and I'm hoping, because I really believe that everything is cyclical.
Oh, yeah.
Everything is cyclical. I think, and I don't know how long it's going to go. You and I have talked about this, but I think it might, I'm hoping it doesn't take a generation, because, and that's where I kind of want you to take us next, is because you and I had a great conversation about the Gen Zs and the information. And I want to leave it with this, and I'm going to turn it over to you, because I hear about balance. I heard you talk about it. And somebody said something to me one time, and I'm going to try to fit that into this right now, because they talked about this feel-good thing, and he said, I never saw a feel-good thing that would buy butter when I was at a grocery store. And I wanted to kind of take that, and if we could give some context, and I love that word that you started off with, if we could give some context to what's happening into our industry, working lesser hours, making less money. And when we talk about balance, and you can't take balance to a grocery store or to a mortgage department or to a bank to get a new car. Can you give some context? Because I know you've had some great insight from the Kim report and so on. Could you give us some more insight to what you see is going on? And then maybe we can talk about what do people need to do to make a shift inside there?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me throw one quick thing related to what you were just talking about, and then jump quickly into that. And something else I think that's happening in education, or in how we perceive learning, and then perhaps what the institutions are teaching us, which again are so important, but it's changed with time. Something I've observed over time is those who are lucky enough to be taught the kind of foundational information they need to be really masterful in their craft. A lot of that's disappeared. And I'm talking about things like angles, just that concept of an angle. That if you have a great teacher who, Iris H. Pope, is a great educator in the industry, and Ira uses the clock. He says, because angles is too complicated for me. I learned angles by referencing the clock, which is such a great idea because that leverages things that people already know. And go, okay, the clock. Now let's talk about where are the hands on the clock to understand 90 and 45. But a lot of that's being skipped over these days. We're in a hurry, and even on the educational side, a lot of the education is reactive to what excites people. They want to jump right to technique. So it's another one of those institutional problems in the industry where I think this generation, potentially because of not themselves, but because how people are choosing to teach them, a lot of stuff's getting left out, which makes you feel less competent. And to that point of depression, when we go part-time, there's a great quote, and I don't remember who said it, but it has to do with to master a craft. And I've heard different numbers, but you need like 5,000 hours of training. Somebody else said 10,000, but it's still not even training, doing. It takes the doing of haircutting and haircutting and haircutting for thousands of hours before you master it. Well, let's say you come into the industry and unlike, 10, 20 years ago, you come in at 20 hours a week or 24. The average in the industry collectively now is 24 hours a week. And you come in at 20, you come in at half what we used to come in. It's going to take you twice as long to get to 5,000 hours.
Yeah.
Twice as long. A lot of us aren't built to have that much patience in life. We're just not. Life isn't as long, the older you get, the more you realize that, we have so much time on this earth. And I think career-wise, again, we're in a hurry. We want balance, but we're still in a hurry. That's a generational thing, right? And so balance, but hurry up. Give me what you promised me. And I get that, but I just think, again, contextually, I just have to say that on average, it is taking twice as long because we cut our work weeks in half. So that means by just simple math, it takes twice as long to master anything. And that's a big idea because I think we need to be saying to those who want to go part-time or more. We've always had part-time. It's one of the most beautiful things about this industry is you can choose to work part-time. We're an industry that's 85% female. We're an industry that many of the women who work in this industry want to have families, have children, and they need some time to dedicate to their children. And I always say when the big argument for balance came up, I'm like, we've always had balance. 20, 30 years ago, I knew young moms who said to the owners in busy salons that I need to cut back for a while while Johnny's growing up. And they did. And they found their way to success. But again, we've never had as many people part-time, and that means it's going to take a lot longer to become successful. I think we should be teaching patience in beauty school.
Yeah.
I think we should be choosing patience as a value of small businesses, because if everybody in the salon's working part-time, we kind of have to embrace patience as a group of people because it's just going to take longer, so I think that's important.
Yeah.
Statistics, the numbers, the KPIs, that's the Kim report. So the Kim report is an industry report that's owned or been built through a collaborative effort with the big tech companies, but hosted by Salon Interactive, which is a retail platform that's really cool, allows independents and salons, all kinds of salons, to be able to sell stuff online and does it in a really innovative way. So they bring all the POS systems, the Vigaros, the Forests, the Mevos, the Boulevards, many, many others, and they contribute that in a really organized, kind of almost scientific way. And that allows the larger industry to go, what's happening? Like really what's happening? Not the information that we can't trust, because this stuff has all kinds of people with their hands in it, including myself, who are looking, my role is to look at it and say, okay, this is being done the right way. We can trust this information. And there's others looking at it the same way that I do. So it's a great kind of community exercise that is providing information first and foremost to big brands to help them strategize. They're paying money into it. But now it's rolling out to the larger industry slowly but surely. And what it tells us right now, I'll use 2025 data as a jumping off point, is that collectively, we're not in a great spot. We're not in a tragic spot as an industry, but year over year, 25 over 24, we are about even on the amount of money coming into the industry, the amount of money coming into individual salons and to individual practitioners. But we also had significant price increases last year. So when you adjust for price increases, which is a whole math thing that has to do with money, we're actually down a little bit. And most hairdressers I talk to and most salon owners say, yeah, that's true. I'm frustrated.
Yep. But I agree with you 100% on that.
It's nice to know that we're all feeling the same pain, but that doesn't help me be better, right? Yep. But context, right? This data is context. And I think there's a little bit of peace in knowing that you fit the average. And now you just have to figure out whether you want to work in a different way, a harder way, whatever it looks like to be better than the average, right? That's whether we're individual people behind the chair. Hopefully you want to be better than average, Yep. And the same in the bigger industry when it comes to money and how we measure our success or not. We know that individual visits are stretching. People are stretching time between appointments across the entire industry. That's a problem. Because if you have all the same clients this year as last, and I hope that's not the case, but if you did, and everybody stretches their appointment, then do the math. That means you have less money coming in. So we can't have everybody stretching their appointments unless we bring a whole lot more clients in. We know that average tickets are down a little bit. And so average tickets down a little bit, and we've had price increases means that year over year, actually, we're doing a little bit worse than we think we're doing because, again, price increases. It's not artificial, but it kind of makes the numbers hard to compare to each other. Retail is in a really bad place. I mean, and interestingly, in the Kim data, what they do is they segment everything. So they look at and then pull all together so they can average it. But they look at what's happening in the one chair, one person to two person suite. Like, what does that whole category look like? And that category had probably the biggest challenge in retail. Their retail was down quite a bit. That's probably not a big surprise. People going independent maybe aren't feeling the need to retail. Although those of us who understand the value of retail would say, "Oh, you're missing out if you're not retailing." And then they look at the 2 to 5 service providers. They don't look at chairs. They look at service providers. How many people are generating income? They don't look at receptionists or other people working in the business. Just service providers. 6 to 10, 11 to 20, and 20 or more. Those are the categories. And that's interesting too, because you look at retail and you can see, the smaller salons are falling off more in retail. Middle is challenged, and the very top is up a little tiny bit. They look at color services. Color services across the industry are also down. I was surprised. We've not had this data before, but the average across the industry of all dollars in salons, color services, I think, is 42 or 43%. If someone said, just take a wild guess before you saw the data, I would have said, I'll bet anything that color service revenue is more than 50%.
Yeah.
But I know
that
a lot of
been
great
my
salons.
Guess.
Yeah, I know a lot of great salons who are very successful, and part of their success because they've tripled down on color services, right? And they know how to add services to that ticket and add more color services on top of color services and get people in more often. But they're the unicorns. So the data is not horrible, but it says we're at best flat and a lot are down. Our client counts generally as an industry are down. Something that is not being measured, and when we get together and have our Kim meetings, I said this in the last meeting, said, I question when I read the data, is the demand for services amongst the general public, is it off a little bit? Do fewer people want to come to salons? If our guest counts are falling, is it falling because they don't want to be here? Is it falling because they can't afford to be here? Like, what's happening there? And we don't have that information. So I'll stop there and let you throw something at me.
I bet we have something in common. I have this love-hate relationship. I hate paying for something that I'm not using. I hate working in a small, cramped box. Yet, I love working in a cool salon that impresses my clients, and I love the culture and synergy of a team while enjoying the freedom of being my own boss. You too? What if all that was available to you at the salon you rent from? Meet Artist on Go, a game-changing way to rent salon space. With Artist on Go, you only pay for the time you're behind the chair. You can choose a salon that fits your vibe, location, and amenities. With Artist on Go, you're a part of a stylist community, not hustling alone. Plus, you get to enjoy perks like clean towels and back bar supplies. Check out Artist on Go, built for stylists serious about their clients and growing their brand without the hassles of managing a space. Here's the kicker. you can save more than 50% on your rent. To find out more, go to bit.ly/artistongocb. That's bit.ly/artistongocb. No, first of all, great stuff. And I think that what you're saying is that if the more data that we have, the better that we can shift.
Yeah.
So
it's hopping on the scale, right? I think we all understand the hopping on the scale thing. That's data, right? You're feeling a little uncomfortable, maybe like I'm not a person who's ever jumped on the scale very much. But occasionally, especially as I've gotten older, I was a skinny kid. I was a skinny kid. I was in high school. I was 6 feet tall and I was 138 pounds. So now I'm 6 feet tall. I hope still I'm going to start shrinking soon. And I'm 168 pounds. So I'm still not big, but it's all relative. When my pants are starting to feel tight, I hop on the scale. And I get my data point. And that data point informs me, and I can figure out what to do. It's the same with the Kim data. It's the same with oh my gosh, the POS systems. You've probably been more attached to this than me. When I go into the salon of a friend and I say, hey, can I look at your POS system and see your reports and everything? The amount of information that salons have, that individual independents or chair renters have on their phones from their booking platforms. And industry-wide, we don't even use 10% of the reports that are in these platforms. I hear this from data companies. There's so much information, and that information will guide you to more success if you know how to use it.
Yeah, or and I love it, guide you to success, but it also shows you. Where was I talking? I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said they as a consultant, they went in and they were looking at their retail space, and they said that because they had a partner that was also had a side hustle in a they were also a sales consultant as well. Even though that person was an owner, they were over. They were like had 75% too much stock involved, and so if you can't look at the numbers and say, oh my God, look, here's the amount of money that I've got on retail, and here's how much stock I've got on hand. Because I remember even for us when we were first starting off in the did I say the 70s? I meant the 90s. That I remember they said, bring in all these lipsticks, and we brought in lipsticks, and we sold all of these. And quite frankly, at that time, we had on the average our retail to service was 35%.
Wow.
And I said, where is my profit that I'm getting from this makeup that I brought in? Because we weren't makeup artists. We didn't know how to sell makeup. But we just said, hey, look, here's the bright, shiny color. And I found all my profit was sitting in those colors that nobody sold because we didn't bring in the right colors to sell. So if you can not only look at it, and again, I don't want this to sound like for people that are in independents or stylists and whatnot to think that this is not information that's good for me. It is good for you. Because the more you keep stats on your numbers and how to grow your numbers, and if you want to shift from 40 hours a week down to 28 or whatever, how do you pack more time in there? So that's where your balance comes in. I've never seen anybody, first of all, yes, I'm a baby boomer. No, I never had balance in my life because I'm like you, I'm a workaholic and I love what I do and I can't stand sitting around. However, if I want to take time and have more time to go on my holidays and I want to work just 40 hours a week or 28 hours a week, what's the number that I want? Because that's what pays for my family. That's where I get things from my family and me. And if I want to work less, great. Just pack more stuff inside there. And I think that's what the numbers that you're talking about comes to. So you talked to me the other day about the chaos that happens. And I want to talk about that because that's what we've been talking about here now. And so how do we spin that? How do we take the chaos that we have right now and how do we take that and spin it around and use it to our advantage so that we can work less hours and have more balance, but still have that financial, spiritual, and physical growth that I need in order to be a personal developed human being?
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, the chaos is a lot about confusion. They're connected, right? And
Yeah.
us not really understanding, and sometimes maybe being a little too overconfident in our understanding. As I said, Sam Ricardo said, years ago, we're not a complicated industry, and we're not. Retail is a pillar. Understanding, you kind of referenced it. To me, it's understanding capacity versus productivity.
Yeah.
You choose to work 20 hours a week. What's your book look like? What are the holes? How do you more
Yeah.
efficiently manage your time so you can fit one more appointment in? If you're a lot of people go part-time because they're on the book for 40 hours. They can't get past 20 hours worth of client work. And they're like, I got another 20 hours, all these empty holes in between things, a half hour here, 40 minutes. So it feels like 40 hours still, and I can't quite figure out. So I'm going to go part-time. More chaos, to me, is this shift towards less time in the salon. You mentioned side hustle. To
Yeah.
me, part of the chaos today are the post-COVID conversations about go find a side hustle. I was one of the people screaming on my podcast. I'm like, and you mentioned your owner friend who has a partner with a side hustle in the industry. Okay, that's good. You want to have a side hustle, at least stay in the industry. But if the career that you wanted to have and was to love what you're doing behind the chair, and you find a need to go into a side hustle outside the industry, something's misaligned, is in my view. Sometimes the misalignment is you have yet to truly learn the fundamentals of business.
Yes.
Going back to those late 70s for me, probably early 70s for you, Chris. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, that's when I was 4. Yeah.
But for me, when I got to Pivot Point in the late 80s, something that I heard it, I watched it, I experienced it all the time, was that success in this industry is directly connected to education. That's
Yes.
more, when you stop learning this industry, and the industry is driven by trends. Like
Yeah.
when you and I first started, nobody's talking balayage, maybe over in Paris, but they weren't in this country. It didn't show up till years and years later. And I saw some pretty amazing energy get really excited in the salon space around this thing called balayage. I mean, today it's like normal, where
Yes.
so many years ago it wasn't. But if you don't keep learning, not just watch on social and think you're going to pick it up, but go to an academy, go find the best balayage educator you can. And usually they're not at trade shows, by the way. I love trade shows. There's lots of great education at trade shows, and there's a lot of average education, just like everywhere else. But you have to avail yourself to the good stuff. And I just think, like the secret decoder ring for chaos is education.
Yeah.
But it's education that aligns with your actual needs. Like another part of the secret decoding of chaos, that dotted line to what I just said, is understanding what you really want and need, and they're connected.
Yeah.
I want X number of dollars. Okay, so what do I need to get me there? And then that's another dotted line, usually over to education of some form. Today, another dotted line, and you're part of this community, Chris, and renowned for it, is coaching. And coaching is different than teaching. It's a nuanced difference, but it is different. And I know people who've gone to, all the best educators in the industry, but they still feel like something's missing.
Yeah.
And then they'll say to me, it's like, oh my God, my life has changed. What happened? I got this coach.
Yeah.
And this coach in a one-on-one situation, not in a small group class or a big group class where you're learning with other people. And that brings its own limitations. Still can get great education. But some of us need that one-on-one to get that education to take us to a whole new level. So back to chaos, and confusion in the larger industry, much of it being, in my view, driven by social media and a lack of understanding of where true knowledge could be coming from and what is true knowledge and what does it take to really achieve skills. The biggest shortage in the industry today is mentors. Taking a sidestep, but it connects to everything I was talking about. Because coaching is closer to mentors than teaching is close to mentors. Growing up in the industry and watching hairdressers grow up and success happen all around me and being lucky enough to observe it, it was so often when you said, how'd you get here? Like, how'd you get to this $1 million salon? Mentorship, role models. They point at someone and said, I got to spend time with that person. I worked for this person who is known to be, a rock star. And I was fortunate to have these relationships. Not just people I bumped into, not somebody I just sat in the classroom, relationships. And in those relationships often was coaching. We just didn't call it coaching back then.
Yeah.
We didn't always call it mentorship, but fast forward today and we kind of know what these things are. And as we saw, kind of as we were coming up to COVID, kind of the disintegration in many ways of the mass of employment-based salons that were the foundation of this industry for many, many years, as we saw that start to disintegrate, and we went from an industry that was perhaps 25-30% independence, mostly chair rental and some suites. That was the old way. And everybody else in an employment-based salon, it's completely shifted now. 60% of the industry are independent. And kind of by definition, for most, when you move out of a salon with a lot of people in it, whatever business model that is, most of being employment-based, and they're not all perfect, but I'm not here to say, the good and bad of, what's the perfect business model. But one of the things that you lose as independence grows for the entire industry, but also individually, is the opportunity to find a mentor.
Yeah.
Because so often, again, those stories I heard, the mentors were inside the business. And if they weren't inside the business, they were because that business, good or bad, as far as the whatever in the business, great leadership, poor leadership, whatever. But often those businesses, because of their relationship with product companies, one day Chris Baran walked into your salon. One day Sam Villa walked into your salon. Robert Cromius walked into your salon, literally at certain eras, right?
Yep.
And the opportunity to connect with them, to learn from them, and to perhaps even have a mentorship relationship, I believe is game changing. So I think the number one shortage in the industry today is lack of mentors, because just mathematically, everything's changed. So you got 600,000 people today who work independent. And the opportunity, I would argue, to find a mentor is exponentially smaller than ever in my 40 years in the industry. Doesn't make it a bad thing. It's one of those what is.
Yeah.
And the question over time for the whole industry, especially for big companies, who benefit from the success of everybody. The more successful people, the more the big companies benefit. That gives them reasons to invest millions of dollars in education every year. That's why they do it. I'm hoping they'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, that was amazing stuff. And you really made my brain go in there. And I took down a few notes here. And I started to think about how, and I don't know if I'm stuck on it, but this thing of balance, 24 hours versus 28 versus 40 hours a week or whatever.
Yeah.
And interesting thing that happened just recently is my son had a problem with his elbow, and he went in for some x-rays, and he had appointments made, and the doctor phoned him up and said, "Hey, I've got an appointment today. I had a cancellation. Can you come in?" And that stuck in my brain. And then that combined with what you just talked about, I've heard from if people have stylists that are in their salon and they don't have a booking, or they're supposed to be working till 6 o'clock. I'm not saying supposed, that was a wrong word. Let me say that again. Your booking time is till 6 or 5 or 4 or whatever your shift is.
Yeah.
But I don't have a booking on the last 2 appointments. Can I just go home? Or I've heard it from people that are that have, because there's a big shift into hybrid salons right now, where you have your commission based and you also have either suites or independents that are booked within there as well. And the people that I've talked to that said, oftentimes those independents, they rented the space, but they're not there.
Right, because they don't have to be.
Yeah, they don't have to be. I can just go home. I can have my balance.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're going to be there for that amount of time and you get a cancellation, or if you don't have an appointment, why don't you look at your book and say, "Hey, I know I've got you booked in, but why don't you be like that doctor and say, 'Hey, why don't you come in? I've just had a cancellation and I can fit you in here, and I've actually got extra time where I can spend more time with you.'" And rather than just leaving, take your spot that you have blocked out for earning your money for you and your family, and maximize on that by using some of those techniques.
Yes.
And rather than just saying, "Not busy, I'm just going to go home," say, "I'm not busy there, but I'm going to come in 5 minutes earlier and phone a couple of my people and fill in that spot." I mean, old techniques, old techniques.
Old.
But
you
it's
can
nothing.
modernize that. right?
Yeah,
You
I'm
can
not giving
modernize.
anything new, but
Yeah.
did you know that with a new
And,
kid coming out?
and modernizing a version of that would be using your apps, using your reports,
Yes.
understand the things, using social media. I see lots of hairdressers who I don't even know some of them. They show up in my feed and they're announcing an opening today. They're using
Yes.
social media to say, hey, I've got it's 8 o'clock in the morning. I got an opening at 3.
Yeah.
Anybody want to come in? I'm not saying offer specials or anything. Some do,
No.
some don't. But it's a more modern way of doing it. You made me think of another word. I clearly love words. And this is an important one. And I think everybody can relate to this, but we don't always relate it to our careers and our businesses. And it's so important when I look at who's successful versus, who may be not quite there. And that's self-discipline.
Yes.
It's a big, big idea. And I know a lot of people in this industry who are very self-disciplined when it comes to the time they spend in the gym for their personal health, which affects their business life too. We kind of get that, or to keep the weight off or to get the weight on or to whatever. There's a lot of, the meals we eat. I think we understand self-discipline in certain parts of our life, and we often compartmentalize those things. Self-discipline, again, you look at those people who've been successful, that's a big, big part of it. They don't always know it, but you can look at them and go, that person has the discipline. They're on the book till 5. They finished at 2. For whatever reason, there's nobody there. They find ways to get things done in that next 3 hours because it's kind of for a self-disciplined person, typically, unless they've been, kind of busting their butt recently in whatever their schedule is and however they choose to live their careers, they have that self-discipline that's almost non-negotiable.
Yeah.
That I have 3 extra hours. I don't want to have 3 extra hours next week. And how am I going to get there? Well, I'm going to be disciplined and I'm going to learn something. I'm going to market myself more. I'm going to play on social media. I'm going to go look at something I highly recommend to people. Go find role models. You want to be on social media and be successful? Go find role models in the industry who are good at it. Go find a hairdresser in another town. Go follow some of the influencers who are really good at building an audience. Understand what's different about them. They're not trying to get where you're trying to get. So sometimes you have to kind of fine tune it and put it in context. If you're following a hairdresser, this is a mistake people make, who is really good at social media talking to other hairdressers. Don't apply necessarily what they do and how they do it to get more clients.
Yeah.
Because that's a different formula. Anyway.
Yeah. And you just brought up something that I'm so glad that you mentioned. And it kind of swings back to mentorship and that it's harder to get it now because you don't have that relationship. Mm-hmm. We did a podcast a little bit back with, and I'm sure you know him, Kelly Cardenas.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, a brilliant guy. And, I've never met such a wonderful soul.
Yeah.
And he said, and
he's so good on stage. Oh my gosh, he's so good on stage.
Oh, and he used this. I'm gonna butcher the number, but he said the hardest part is if you go to somebody and say, "Can you mentor me?" They're thinking all of the time they got to end in, and generally they got a busy life. Mm-hmm. But what Kelly does is he advises you go to find somebody. He says if you have somebody that's successful, they always want to help somebody. But here's his rationale. He said, if you know it's about time, just say, listen, I need to have a chat with you, and it's about XYZ, and I want to beg. Now catch this. I'm not going to use the right number, but Kelly says, I want to talk to you for 3 minutes and 37 seconds. And I just need you to answer this one question for me. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then he goes in, and the guy will say, yeah, 37 seconds, I can do that. And you go in organized, and you just say, here's what I need. Yep. This is it. I know the question I have to ask. And then let them decide when the end of that 3 minute, 37 seconds is.
I love that.
And I think that's a way when there's so much of a less link that you have to know the person that you can still start to you can ask the person, and the worst thing they're going to do is just say, no, I'm busy. And they're never going to say that. Yep. They'll say, I can't do it right now, but if you can do it at this time, then I'll gladly help you.
I so love that. And again, Kelly has been a mentor to so many people. I know so many people he's mentored. For those who might know Elizabeth Fay, who's become really a well-known person in the industry, well, Kelly Cardenas was the first mentor that she had in her professional life. And she was a client in his chair, and he became a personal mentor who then inspired her to want to join the industry. So
Yeah.
Kelly's a special guy.
And right now, one of the most amazing people out there for wellness.
Yeah. All because of a connection to a hairdresser when when she couldn't even afford to be a client. You know, he did her hair as someone paying it forward in life, because Kelly is that person, also a great husband in that. He did her hair as a young teenager in high school in exchange for her getting good grades.
Yeah.
How good a story is that?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, and that's the effect that somebody that, a mentor can be somebody that just had one influence on you or been over a longer period of time.
Exactly.
I want to, just before I ask you this final question for the time that we have here, and I just want to get your advice that you could have for the people, for whatever it is, what advice would you give them? But I just want to say, that you always bring so much value with your knowledge and who you are, and the fact that you never hold back, and you always, I've seen people that hold their cards close to their chest. What's that?
Gets me in trouble sometimes.
Yeah, well, yeah. And that's okay, because that's their problem, not yours, So I just want to say thank you, but is there any final advice that you would give to people listening right now when it comes to our industry and moving forward?
Ooh, that's a big one. I'm going to go back to context. I just think it's more important than ever, and I think fewer of us have it than ever. And I think it's easy not to have it across every part of our life. Something I think I've learned in, again, very kind of divisive times, I'm thinking not the industry, yes, but in our larger lives, I've learned myself to question how I feel about anything, and to almost always say, I need to go back and study a little bit. I need to go listen to things from somebody else's point of view and get out of my own head and get a more well-rounded understanding of whatever the topic is at hand. See if I can find a little bit of wiggle room in my own thinking to, number one, understand where that person's coming from. And that could be professional, as well as personal. And then hopefully use that information to get me a little closer to where I'm trying to get to. Because again, it is a chaotic world. It is a confusing world. And so I think, kind of letting go of preconceived notions, I think, which is sometimes easier to do if you admit that you don't know everything, and that, again, you're going to go back because what I'm describing to me is another way of educating myself, which goes back to the earliest things I talked about, learning in this industry, which is education's pretty much the answer to everything, including getting ahead, including finding your next career path or next career opportunity. So, I think, just, understanding the importance of connecting to this idea that we live in a larger world, and there's a lot to understand. And at the end of the day, we'll never understand it all. So we just have to keep trying to expand our mind and our experiences, and most importantly, just how we look at everything, including our careers.
Yeah. And thank you. Because even what you just said gave me context. And that context was that, and when we're living in divisive times, and it's so easy just to write it off, whatever it is. And I think if it made me think, I was watching on TV just the other day, and how they have they always trying to find a good, a feel good segment to fit in with all the other stuff that they put in around it. And they had that, I don't know if you saw that thing where these group of monks were walking from one place to the other. I don't remember from wherever it was to wherever it was, but it was a long trek, and how people were attracted to them. And there was a story about the dog that they didn't invite him in, and the dog just came along because of the vibe and stayed with them. And and I just thought, and they asked the monk, and I always think, this old joke about some monk chanted evening. So I'm just going to leave that all alone. But they asked the monk, and they said, how is it in this divisive time that everything is going on that you can have this resonance about you? Mm-hmm. And he said, just every morning, we advise people just to get up and to say that today I will live in peace. Mm-hmm. And I think if we'd all take that and just say, today I just choose peace to live in, and we'd have more kindness that we would put out to everybody and to ourselves. Yes. And I'm just reading going back and rereading one of Brene Brown's book, and she was talking about when it comes to empathy is just to cut yourself some slack, and just to say, look, I'm not perfect, and it's okay for me just to practice some self-kindness in there as well. So there was a lot in there.
That's another word. We don't have time to dig into empathy, but I would attach it to something that can come out of context. And, I think empathy is so powerful and so important, that we're empathetic, most importantly, to the challenges that others are facing, so it brings a lot to ourselves. So thank you for having me. I always have such a good time with you, Chris.
Listen, you know what? One of these times we're not going to do this publicly, but I always have such great conversations with you, and I look forward to the next one as well. And this won't be the last time that's on here as well, because we always want to find out where you're at. So whether you're 139 or 225 in our episodes, that I promise you that for my own goodness and the sake of our industry, I'll have you back. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
It's a pleasure. Thanks again for watching this episode, and if you liked what you heard, remember to smash that like or follow button, depending on your preferred platform, and make sure to share it with anyone you know that might be a fellow Headcase. Headcases is produced by Cut Action Media, with Marjorie Phillips doing the planning parts, Lee Baran on the video bits, and Adrian Taverner mixing the audio jazz.